Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you to our home in Telefónica with a very special person today, Siri Hustvedt, who received Princesa de Asturias award this year, and I ask you to give her a round of applause. It's an honor for us to have her here, and we want to thank the publishing house, Fuencarral, for helping us to have this encounter here today in our home. It's a meeting that we organized some time ago already, and we had to cancel. In the month of April, she was going to be here with us, even before she was a nominee for the awards. So she wanted to have finally that meeting today, which we are very thankful for. This award is obviously recognizing all her career, all her work, but also her effort for empowering women, and also for identifying which are the keys for inequalities between men and women, why we are still living that kind of situations. This research has been very important in Siri's life, and for all of us who think like her, and also her career in literature. Siri, if you could hear her speech in the ceremony, which was amazing, she described how multidisciplinary systems are very important to understand progress and to boost progress, how we need to work together so we can all understand our reality and we can promote progress. This is something that we work for in Fundación Telefónica. We promote that in this space with our projects, and we believe that science, technology, humanism, values, it all needs to go together so we can, in a way, have a better world and go towards a better world. We fully agree with her perspective, with her view. And I wanted to tell you, Siri, that when a couple of years ago we had Paul here, Paul Oster here, we already introduced him as your husband, and he actually saw that it was amazing, that it was great that he was being introduced as your husband. So we've always been very in favor of your work. We are very happy to have you here. We also have Ana Bella Estevez, creator of the Fundación Ana Bella. She's going to share her experience with us. She's doing a lot for women. We were talking to her a while ago. She was telling us how she started filming a video about her own experience, and in this way she's opened a way for other women to share their experiences, sometimes not that good experiences, so that they can grow and recover their self-esteem. We also have the writer Edurne Portela. Thank you very much. And the journalist Isabel Valdés. She's going to be the moderator. All of them are very committed to the work of women, to promoting their role in society, and I hope we will have a fruitful discussion where we are going to be able to share some thoughts of people who agree with our vision, with enriching diversity, with how important the role of women is in our society. Thank you. Well, I'm going to be very brief because obviously with these three ladies, amazing ladies here, we're going to have this discussion in Spanish, so you can all follow it. We also say hello to the people following us on streaming. And obviously there's nothing much we can say to introduce Siri Hustvedt because she received the Princesa de Asturias award a few days ago. And in her speech she asked a question that was some kind of what if, and it's the best one possible, the one that gives us the possibility to change. only imagining these changes, we can have the circumstances for those changes to take place. And it's true that expectations quite often can be frustrating. They also generate progress. Yesterday we knew that the number of female victims of sexist violence was higher than the figure last year. A few days ago, Siri asked, what if rules were different? And that's what we started thinking in Spain around 10 years ago. Through legislation, through policies, through feminist collectives. And women started changing in their different areas. And this country ended up generating a feminist tsunami in 2017. It was a mirror for the whole world. And that change, had its highest peak last year. All support is not enough, and I think that culture is one of the areas that is key to conform society and our way of thinking. Theater, music, cinema, and literature, of course. Language which transforms our way of thinking and our societies. In her last book, Hustvedt, the main character reminds us of Simon Weil, and it says that fiction is a very important part of our life, and we are in real life today, and we got all the ways to this point through the fiction that the reality that these three ladies had at some point in their lives. Siri Hustvedt really likes the idea of all these areas coming together. Multidisciplinarity is something very important for her. And I would like to start our discussion asking her, Siri, do you think that the world can end up being egalitarian? Can we have a peaceful world without recovering humanities, which is something we have lost, unfortunately?
Just a small question. Well, it's a very big question. I think something we were actually talking about before and that you mentioned, it is very hard to occupy a place you haven't imagined. So part of the movement toward equality and toward eliminating hierarchies, both in the university and in the world that we live, has to do with imagining a future that is different, right? Because until you can do that, it seems normal. It seems as if it's the way it's supposed to be, right? We live in our hierarchies, not necessarily comfortably, but the pain that people feel is accepted, and there's no language to say it's wrong, it's bad. So the imagination is part of making the change. So are we heading for a much better democratic future? I certainly hope so, but I certainly know that living now in the present, and we have an example right beside me of someone who has made real changes in the real world for, well, millions of women who have paid attention. So it's there. It's there.
Me gustaría ahora que...
Now I would like to, well, this takes us back to something that we were talking about before Siri got here, which is how education needs to be a part of childhood from the very beginning to develop imagination also, right? Yes, it's something that you dealt with in your works. I'm thinking of a moment in The Summer Without Men where the narrator says boys will be boys and girls will be girls. But really, girls need to be girls the way we've been taught to be girls, or through that imagination, through that education in how we can imagine a different future from childhood, maybe we can transform that idea. And we've also listened to you in the speech when you received the Princesa de Asturias award, how you wish for all girls to be able to read, to imagine themselves in freedom and being equal to boys. I think that's always been very present in your works, in your way of thinking, also in the way you talk about the literary fact in writing, in reading, and how, in that sense, there is a gender bias, a way of understanding literature written by men or women or ourselves when we read literature by men or by female or male writers, how we internalize that sexist education that we've received. So even when we write, when we read, we kind of do an exercise, an unconscious exercise of sexism, right?
Grant authority, I call it the masculine enhancement effect. And there's a related feminine denigration effect. And this is part of all of us because we live in a shared culture. And you have to become, I think of it as exquisitely conscious of our own biases. And I think it's very important to understand that you cannot separate that feeling of what authority looks like and what it is from incidents of sexual violence, right? One is the legitimate feeling that men are the ones who have control, legitimate power, and that feeling can lead people with the power to forms of abuse and even forms of not knowing that it is abuse, as you were saying earlier, until, it's obvious, I guess. But all of these things are related. So the fact that men feel that a work of literature written by a woman is somehow less than, or that a woman's intellect cannot possibly match that of a man's, these are forms of condescension that are part of the culture as a whole, and they have to be pointed out again and again, right? It's the thing, you can't be silent. Audre Lorde, one of the great American essayists and poets, talked about the silencing of people. And this, I have discovered in my own life too, you have to say it. So I point this out. If someone asks me a question that I find rather stunning, I will say, this is the way I heard that question. Could you tell me if I'm right? This sounds as if you're doing whatever and ever. And that leaves the door open for the person to respond to you, but you haven't gone home without saying anything, and then once you get home, you think about all the things you could have said. And I think many women do that, right? So we have to always answer back.
Esto enlaza muy bien con...
This takes us back with something that we've dealt with in Spain, which is fake syndrome. Like, women feel like they are not supposed to be in the place where they are, that they don't have the merits to be there, that they are not supposed to be telling what they want to tell. Ana Bella, who has been speaking out loud in many places, one day she thought that, well, she had the right to be on TV showing her face, which is also what we would like to have there, speaking out loud for the media, for everybody to say what they have to say, especially about gender violence. Yes, and also related to what you're saying, I had amazing grades. I graduated with all honors. I studied in Sevilla, doing big effort. I know the Greek alphabet. I still remember that. But no one taught me how to love myself. They taught me to outlive myself for others. I needed those values next to math and Greek, and I wouldn't have suffered as much as I suffered. We need to teach our children the value of empathy, of taking care of others, of being educated in equality. Men are not supposed to abuse. Girls need to be empowered. They need to be able to say no. They need to say yes to their dreams. They need to know that their career, their professional career, is as important as everything else. And I studied in university, but then my husband made me choose education or our love. And I chose what I had been taught to care for above everything else, love. And it's true that I was seeing news about women who were killed, and I thought, why didn't they leave their home before they were killed? And my husband even hit me with his belt, and I wasn't aware. I wasn't conscious that I was being abused. Most abused women in Spain are invisible because we don't realize that we are going through that. In Europe, millions of women are going through this, and only 14% ask for help. So when I escaped, I wanted to encourage all the women, I thought about all those women, about those posters, those signs with women. I never felt identified with them. So I decided to go on TV, showing my face and offering a positive message. If you break silence, if you speak out loud, you have an alternative to being killed. You can be happy. And if I could do that, you can do it too. After that first program, after that first TV appearance, I was called by other women. Then I started helping other women. Leticia joined us. She was a psychologist. I never thought a psychologist could be abused. We helped her. We've helped lawyers, TV presenters. I'm not gonna say names, but we've helped prestigious doctors, judges. I hope that some of these women with important positions in companies, in public institutions, director of the FMI, for example, I hope some people like this could appear in the media and say, I'm being abused. But they don't do it because they don't want to speak out loud about this. How are you letting yourself go through this? How you, an engineer, let a man do this to you? Maybe it's a minister, an engineer. Any man can be an abuser. Any man. And well, I couldn't reach all the women who really needed 200 million women in the world being abused. I couldn't get to all of them. And it's true that, like the director of Fundación Telefónica said, I filmed a video and I posted it on Facebook. 92 million views. Millions of women asking for help. And so I told all these women to build a network, to get together, and all this suffering that we all want to forget, we need to transform it in an experience to help others. We need to stop being victims, and we need to become surviving women, agents for change, helping other women. We are 21,000 women already together. If you want to join us, you just need to check on us on Facebook, and we are helping women, supporting them in trials and hearings. We are also present in 72 countries in social media. So when a woman needs help, they have 300, 400 women already available for her to answer her, to give her support.
Say something about you. So we have to move the shame and put it in the right place. The shame belongs to people who perpetrate violence. They are the people who need to feel guilt and shame, not the people who have received that violence. And that kind of strange, perverse reality is only possible in a culture that has created a hierarchy between male and female. And we also should remember that there are male abusers of men.
Por eso
Vulnerable men.
nosotras estamos co-creando con los medios para que los medios
Yes, and we are collaborating with the media for them to contribute to this change, because all the statistics are, well, what you just said, 49 women killed already. Why didn't we say 49 men have killed women? We need to focus on the violence perpetrator. 1,000 women victims of gender violence. No, gender violence is not a twister just blowing people away. No, it's a few men perpetrating that violence. They are the ones who are responsible. So we need to change the focus. We will stop being the problem, because it does feel like that we have that shame. If we change the focus, you who are a writer, it's actually changing a word, right? We're not victims, we are surviving females. We need to talk about violence, not about women killed. Just one word can change the world.
Passive voice, a very dangerous thing in politics. Don't forget it. There's an actor, in this case, criminals. That's what you're saying, right? Subject, verb, object. If you leave out the subject, you've missed the point.
Por eso en los medios de comunicación.
That's why in the media, since a few years ago, we've changing the language that we use to talk about gender violence. We're not talking about a woman has been killed, but we're starting saying a man has killed his partner, right? And that's very important too. Yes, and that hierarchy that Siri was mentioning is also interesting for me. I wanted us to talk about how in this society where the hierarchy is not only men and women, but we also have the rich and the poor, and we have that social recognition of different people. It's important for people like Edurne, who is writing, or Siri, who is also a writer, or Anabella, who is an activist and has a foundation, how the media, actresses, singers, how that all those people who are higher in society, they can take a step forward to tell about these things.
Class is always involved. And you know, the abuse, if you go back in time, women who worked in laundries, domestic workers, into the present day, waitresses. These are people who are particularly vulnerable because not only are they women, or they identify as women. Remember, again, we live in gender fluid societies more and more, and men who identify as either effeminate or gender fluid are more vulnerable to attack as well. And in the United States, we talk now a lot about intersectionality, which is an old term, right? So the American waitress who is, also black, is more vulnerable, again, because racism and sexism are mingled in her particular form of vulnerability. So this is good to remember. Being poor makes it worse. Having money, having class status helps you, and maybe can help some people use their positions, as you were saying, judges, to step out and say something. And also to recognize something that in my own little way I recognized. My husband was mentioned. I have constantly fielded questions about him in ways that he has never had to field about me. And for a long time I thought, well, so stupid. It's like, just ignore it. Don't say anything. When you realize it's not personal, that you have become the representative for these misogynistic, hateful questions, then it's much easier to answer, right? And you become part of something that is not, about your little private domestic life.
En ese sentido también, tú has hablado...
In that sense, also, you've talked about the question of being a female intellectual, public intellectual, as they're called in the US. We don't have a word in Spanish, especially when you are a woman, because being a woman and being public, actually a public woman has a very different connotation, which is related to prostitution. So,
Pero bueno, pero el public intellectual...
No, but the public intellectual is a figure, an idea that we don't have in Spain. And I believe, the same way it's happening in the US, that we have an anti-intellectualism, which is related to very radical right wing politics. We've seen that in Trump's politics, in Salvini's Italy, and in Spain we have our own version. And that intellectualism goes together with that misogyny that you were talking about. And I think that movements like Ana Bella's, or that defense of our feminist awareness, like you may show, or Isabel in her works as a journalist, or myself as a writer, what we see is how language is radicalized in that hate against women, against vulnerable minorities, related to social classes or to gender. And I really agree with you with the idea that we need to speak out loud, take a step forward, and defend the things that we believe in. And there's something that concerns me, and I would like you to talk about your view about it, which is how we always need to give a political answer immediately, how we are supposed to be immediately fighting, being there in the fight. You reflect a lot, you're a woman who reflects a lot, and you're very committed politically. And where do you find the balance to have a strong position like Ana Bella with her activism, but at the same time taking that step back to be able to reflect, to think over the ideas, to not only to react immediately?
We human beings, right, we are blessed with the possibility to reflect on ourselves as if we were other people. Babies can't do it. Dogs probably don't do it that well, right? So human beings are able to do this. This is one of our great gifts. At the same time, we're social animals. We live together. And there are critical moments in history. I mean, we have to live as ethical, moral human beings. Mm-hmm. And, dithering around about, sexual violence, misogyny, racism, xenophobia, hatred of immigrants and the others. This should not be tolerated, mm-hmm. right? And so it's quite easy, I think, to say, no, I know where I stand on these questions, which does not mean we cannot ask ourselves, why? Why are these movements rising in Europe and the United States? What is it about? Why do racism and misogyny and xenophobia go together in all of them? How are they related? What is it that's happening? What are the feelings that are generating all this? I think, ironically, it's feelings of shame. In part of the population that feels if you elevate people of color, if you bring up a woman, you say she's important, she's an authority, these other people feel diminished, dirtied, lessened. Nothing has changed about their lives or their status. They haven't been wounded or hurt. Nothing has been taken away, but they're perceiving it as that. In the United States, Barack Obama became the image of a certain form of white shame. How can you have a black president of the United States? So understanding what people are feeling, or understanding feelings of masculine humiliation. This is in masculinity studies. Scholars spend a long time doing it. One can understand the feeling without endorsing it, right? And certainly there are lots and lots of men who need to be helped out of poisonous ideas about their own masculinity, ideas that are hurting them. As fathers, as brothers, right? As children, of parents. This is part of reflection.
Ya que ha hablado de Barack Obama,
Since you mentioned Barack Obama, and since we were talking about how we need to imagine things before they actually happen, the day Barack Obama was elected as a president, not so long ago we had black slaves. That day I cried so much because I started thinking, well, no, one day we will have eradicated violence against female. And we can all be change agents for this to happen. As Isabel said, 49 men have killed women with the legislation we have. So what do we need to change now? We need to change. We need to be change agents in our everyday life. We need to give visibility to those women who don't have bruises on their face. People think that physical abuse is the worst kind because they can kill you, they can murder you, but I went through that, and I don't think it's the worst. A relationship with violence is a relationship where you have submission, where you have all kinds of abuse. I had a husband who would hit me because I had enough will to go against him, to protest. So he needed to actually hit me physically. But all the women don't need to go through that because they have the capability to be humiliated, to be tested, to be constantly there in submission. So their partner don't even need to kill them or physically abuse them. That weakness is a life lost, and we can all get those lives back, because I'm sure that we all suspect that a woman near us is being abused, and the only thing we need to do is go to her and ask her, I think you're weird, you feel different since you are with this man. If you need to talk to someone, here I am. Even if that woman says no, maybe you can be the mirror where she looks to herself, and she wonders what's going on with her, because sometimes we just forget about it. We just dedicate everything to our partner, and maybe that's the opportunity for that woman to break her silence. I don't agree with the idea that most vulnerable women are the ones with less resources in minorities, because women in those circumstances maybe receive social support, and it takes them, according to some researchers, 5 years to ask for help, and women with university education, it takes them 12 years to ask for help. So the higher you go in education, in social class, in more difficult it is to break silence. So I really ask you, if you know a woman in that situation, really offer your help. And if you don't know how to do it, call our foundation. We will help you.
Sí, ¿no?
Yes, what you're saying is really related to shame, right? And to that stigma that we feel. Yes, when you've gone through some kind of abuse and you got to a moment with a high position, you are brave, you have courage. We are not weak women. We are actually very strong. We're used to work under pressure. We recover. We are very resilient. We tolerate frustration. We reinvent ourselves to keep going. We actually are women who fight for success because we want our marriage to work out even if it hurts. And we find the way, all that resiliency. If we focus all that energy in our professional world, well, we're gonna be efficient workers. If we focus that energy in society, we're gonna become change agents. We can get to places where institutions can't get, and we can use the resources that we already have available for us. Yes, with this works very well. The word that we are using so much now, it's being devastated. People hate words that are used a lot, and this word would be empathy. Now we have movements against empathy because we've been using it too much. It seems we've been using it too much, but no, empathy is related to that reflection that Siri was saying, and it works in all fields. In gender violence, in politics, we're talking about gender violence as physical abuse, but we have gender breach, psychological abuse, prostitution. We have so many forms of this gender violence that we cannot forget. And I wanted to talk about empathy with you, and about how through literature you can feel identified with what you're reading, and how it is so important, not only what the story is telling us, but the characters who are there, who's telling the story, how everything is developed.
There are some of these empirical scientific studies now. We're talking about reading and empathy, and how it can expand your world. This is, I think, something that's very clear. But, you know, every work of art, but let's stick with literature. Every work of literature, every poem is always for another, right? It exists in what I think of as a loop between. And all of us are made in the between, right? We come out of our mother's bodies, we're cut, and then some caretaker, or usually the mother, but it can be someone else, is carrying us around for a whole year. We're very dependent. And the way we grow socially is through our interactions with the others. In our lives, you know, it's looking, touching, hearing, and babies grow through the eyes of the other, every human being, right? More than most other animals. You know, monkeys often have the babies on the back. We are the animal that is face to face. And that is part of our empathic reality. And I think, you know, unless something terrible happens to people, we are always living in and through other people. And literature makes it possible to expand that, make it larger. People who we would never meet in real life, possibly, right? Our circles will not mix, say, with someone. And that allows us to have experiences that we might not want to have in the real, and also that maybe we have no opportunity to have. And that expands what I think of as the geography of the self, right? And that's why literature is a particular and important form of knowledge. And if we say it's only for women, right, then, you know, it's a girly thing, it's just imaginary. Oh, I don't read novels, but my wife does. I hear that a lot. I once said to this was in the United States, a man on the radio who came with my book, and he said, you know, I don't read fiction. Although he was interviewing me about one of my novels, I thought, you didn't read it? My wife does, would you sign the book to her? And I looked at him and I said, do you mean that Homer, Dante, Shakespeare, Cervantes, I mean, I just listed the whole, are meaningless to you? And he looked at me well, you know, of course that's not what he means. What he means is that I don't read people like you. If we do that, if we think that this is okay, we are depriving our boys, of forms of knowledge that could be crucial to their growing up in reality as adults. Just as studying mathematics and science and everything, these are forms of knowledge we have to give to all of our children. And people don't know what they're saying, right? We need to understand what is being said when you hear things like that.
Y hay algo también que yo
There's also something that I think is very present in your works, which is, I have to say that I totally agree with you in that imagination and fiction are forms of knowledge for the person who writes and also for the person who reads, because in the writing process you find out, you discover many things that maybe your intuition was telling you, but you didn't know that you knew or you didn't remember. And there's also something that is very present in your way of thinking when you write about reading and when you write about writing, which is how imagination and feelings, how imagination and empathy are linked together. There's a quote, what is imagination but a form of becoming another one. How through imagination we not only get in touch with experiences and lives that we will never live, but also with feelings that we didn't know how to to identify, feelings that we don't want to feel, but that help us get in the shoes of another one, of maybe an abuser, actually, sometimes in someone terrible, but we can imagine that other person, and you can maybe not justify, but maybe understand that person better, right? And literature has that power.
That's right. So you can occupy the place and situation of the other, maybe even an alien other, maybe even a frightening other, and see it from this perspective, right? The novel is many-voiced. There are many voices in it, and they conflict. But I think this idea of, what is the imagination? It's being others. Certainly that's true in the novel. But we're imagining all the time, right? If you ever think about the future, you are imagining the future through your past experience. And the bigger your past experience is, which includes reading and other forms of knowledge, the more spacious your future becomes, right? So in order to move into the future, we also have to reimagine our pasts, which is what you have done, right? You have been able to see this, your own story in the light of your own power and moving beyond it, and also giving those tools to other people. And this is a form of rewriting the story through the imagination. And that helps us go on. The imagination can move us out of pain into a better reality. This requires imagination. If you don't have it, you're stuck.
Estabas hablando, Siri, de cómo...
You were talking about how to expand your future, about how literature gives you that opportunity and how it gave you the opportunity to do that. We don't have much time left, but I would like to reflect upon the most immediate future, depending on the different places of the world. Is dark or really, really dark right now. But I would like you to have some panoramic view, if you can help us, how you see this, how you see literature from your feminism perspective. It's not so long ago. For women, it was a disadvantage. Being a woman was a disadvantage in these worlds. And next to that, if Edurne and Anna have anything else to say.
One of the big questions in our political and human private lives is who gets to tell the story, right? Who gets to tell the story? And we all live inside these major mythical narratives that are part of every culture. They change from culture to culture. There's a great Western narrative that we here all live in. So we have to think about taking permission to tell the story and legitimizing multiple perspectives of storytelling and not pretending that one has more authority than another. You know, I'm a pluralist. I think we need lots of voices and lots of different stories, and we need to ingest them because they will make us all larger and better authorities on our own collective life.
Queríamos una última cuestión porque nos gustaría...
Yes, one last question, because we would like to have, maybe to have 3 questions from the audience, maybe a maximum of 3 questions for Siri, because I'm sure that everyone wants to ask a question, but we don't have much time. So the first question. Hello. 4 years ago, actually, in an interview, a journalist asked me quietly, without anybody else listening, but you're a feminist? I was surprised. Well, first because the journalist was younger than me. I'm 47 years old now. And it was astonishing that a young woman asked me, like, if I was dealing with drugs. It was the same voice. I mean, and I'm very impulsive. I gave a speech saying that I absolutely was a feminist, but I saw how she was looking at me in horror because a woman was saying out loud that she was a feminist. And now that I'm a mother, I feel proud because teachers in my kids' school, they tell me that my son is a feminist. And I think, yes, because, well, he had a fight with all boys older than him because they were pulling girls' skirts up. And he was there telling them to leave them alone. And he became a hero in her school for all the girls, of course. But I wanted to ask you how throughout the years, because now saying I'm a feminist, it's a plus, it's positive, how now we have to address that those people who still are pointing at us saying that we are crazy for trying to equality between men and women to be a reality. You've said that we have to speak out loud, we need to take a step forward, we need to give our speeches, but what can we do when people near us are still treating us like crazy women? I'm talking about our families, our friends, and even of someone, which is your boss. When you have a boss, when one of our bosses tell us, stop working as a feminist.
The last part of your question is in a way the most difficult, right? If someone who really does genuinely have power over you, how do you negotiate that form of disapproval? You know, I am fortunate because my job is, you know, in my own study at home, and I'm not going to get fired for saying what I've said here today. You know, I came out as a feminist at 14. That was when I'm 64, so that was the first round of the women's liberation movement. But I do think, again, that dialogue is important, that opening rather than closing doors. So if you calmly interrogate the other person and, you know, how, you know, why is that? Why do you seem to be distressed and upset by my feeling that women and men are equals? Could you develop that idea for me? I tell you, it seems to work. People get a little off balance because they expect you to be angry at them. They expect you to feel intimidated. If you're not intimidated, a lot can be done. And also if you have a little humor. Humor goes a long way. And it can, you know, either disarm people or it can make some people really, really mad. But then you have to keep your cool and keep your humor. So either they run from the room out of their minds or they'll stay and keep talking.
Vamos a hacer una cosa. Hemos cogido.
We're gonna do something. We had a question from this blog. Now we're gonna have one here and then another one back there on the right. Good morning. I would like to ask not only Siri as a writer, but also as a female, so also Edurne, Lucia, all of you. I have a daughter, 11 years old, 11 and a half, and my daughter asked me a question 2 days ago. She dropped me dead. She said, I'm scared of being raped. And, well, I told her I understand. Not from my empathy as a mother, but also as a woman, because I know where we are. How can we work from our own fear as women, not only in that relationship between a mother and her daughter, which obviously affects, but how can we give hope? How can we accompany these girls from a strong position? Because we know our own weakness, we feel our own weakness. So how can we do it from an empowered position, not from violence, but from strength? Thank you.
Very good question for you, but I can say that these conversations with one's children, boys and girls, are very, very important, right? To not avoid this subject. To say these things, these forms of aggression, rape being, a dramatic form of sexual aggression, but there are all kinds of sexual aggression, including talking down to a girl. And I think giving girls and boys, also vulnerable boys, can be targets very often for sexual violence and rape. It's a way of asserting power. And giving girls the tools to answer this and also be prepared for it. I mean, I'm sure that you deal with this a lot in your work.
El miedo es un instinto que nos sale. El miedo.
Yes, fear is an instinct that saves our lives. So it's important to feel that fear in the right measure. And it's fair measure. Why are we raped? Why are we abused? Because we don't listen to our instincts. So we need to teach your girl to follow her instinct, even if he looks very charming. That Durex commercial where we have a very charming boy, but he suffers from gonorrhea, right? Well, if she has that instinct, well, don't go out with him, even if he looks charming. You have an instinct telling you, alert, alert with this guy. Yes, for me it was, I felt perplexed that a girl with 11 years old can already see that vulnerability. It's, for me, that question really astonished me. It's terrible. I would like to know why she feels that fear. Why is she scared being that young? What are the narratives that she got at school with her friends? So, with being 11 years old, can be so aware of her physical vulnerability. So, next to what Siri said and Anna, for me, it's I give you some context. We were in London for the weekend together, and she saw some advertising for prostitution. She had never seen things like that, and she saw women. She asked me, "Mom, why are they doing this?" Right? Well, I do talk to her about these things a little, but seeing women like that explicitly, I felt the need to explain. And so she had heard these kinds of things. She's felt uncomfortable with attitudes of her male classmates. She's aware of her own body, so she felt how boys are looking at her differently. We live in a little village, and she tells me, "Mom, they look at me differently." Well, yes, because you're different. You're not a girl anymore. You're in your way to become a woman, and it's different. So she feels those things. She talks to me about these things in the evening, and she told me that. She told me, "I'm scared of being raped." So I have talked to her about how women are sometimes in that kind of dangers. Well, yes, that's the age when we start feeling that kind of aggression, when our bodies start changing. Well, we're not gonna get into too much detail about this, but that violence, how sad it is that she can already think about the fear of being raped. Well, I have 2 children in my case. 2 sons and 2 daughters. And one of my sons had a folder with the Simpsons, and I opened it and there was porno inside, and now they have access to porno. And I don't know if all the porn they see nowadays is group sex. And I had to sit down with my kids and explain them. Well, the first thing is you don't have such a big dick. You're not gonna have an erection for so long, and sometimes that thing you see there is not real. So, and it's not true that women like it with more men. The more men, the better. And we also have like having a gin tonic with our friends and things like that, because it's true that nowadays it seems that that hardcore sex is affecting the view of how women like sex, and it's not true. It's changing. That's another form of violence that we didn't mention, but even we women are changing our tastes. Now we like everything. We like to have several partners at the same time, and I don't like saying two women having sex. It seems that because men like it, we have to like it too. And it's not like that. We need to show our children how reality is, not only what they see in porn videos. Yes, I think it's important, like Anna is saying, we need to go away of that taboo that has always been there about sex and about gender violence, and I think it's important that we are able to talk about these things. Lesbian sex consumers are women, and it's majority, so... Sorry, but we're not receiving sound in the booth, so we cannot translate. They need to open the microphone.
Vamos, perdona, es que faltan 2 minutos para ser muy rigurosos con el tiempo. Ahí hay una última pregunta.
Yes, one last question. It's been very interesting to listen to all of you, and I wanted to insist on 2 things that we said. The role of education, because we've talked about the glass roof, but we also have to talk about the foundations that we need. And it's really concerning for me how we seem to be progressing, but with toys, for example, how we are still thinking about the old roles. We still give dolls to girls and cars to boys, and that is something essential. And that brings me to something different, marketing. You talked about commercials. How I think in the US, and it also happens here in Spain, what we see is that sexism, but it's a kind of sexism that is limiting for women or men, because men have to be strong. The boy needs to be strong. He needs to be violent in a way, right? And the girl, women, need to be sensible and pretty. And how can we fight against that? And my second question would be related to something that Anna said, which is how the media deal with gender violence. Thank you for your contribution, because I didn't even think about how we could change headings in the news. But it is surprising to me when I see that in the media, it's like just a piece of news. We need to deal with it in a different way. It's like if they were talking about terrorism, but ETA has killed less people since the beginning than women have been killed. So if we had experts addressing this from the point of view of education, we would see it differently. So I think that the media play a very important role. So what can we do against that?
Listen, the media is kind of not a monolithic thing, right? There are lots of different parts of media. Sitting here with people who are involved with media in different ways. And so it's not monolithic. And I think sexism does grow out of our cultural norms. The media is often giving people back their own prejudices, their own forms of playing by the rules. But we can develop, I think, languages of critique. And look, it changes. You know, in the States, gay marriage, that went pretty fast. You know, people worrying about trans men and women now. It's part of media discourse. So this passive voice business, if you point it out, if you have a forum, use it, right? Language is not fixed. It's constantly changing. So we have, yes, there's terrible biases, and they're biases that we often all share, right? A woman who speaks out feels to most of us a lot more aggressive than a man who's doing just the same thing. we have to remind ourselves that we're indulging in that double standard all the time. A girl who brags is completely different from a boy who's bragging. We're shocked by it. We're a little unsettled. If you ask yourself why, you can make a step forward. And also, if you don't exempt yourself, if you say, oh, everyone else is prejudiced, but I have none of it, that helps.
Yo le quería dar otra puntuación.
Yes, I wanted to mention something else, how the media deal with gender violence. Do you know how many years can this last killer? They don't say that. No, because we don't know. The media cannot. No, I don't agree with you, because when the trial with Urdangarin, everybody was saying he's facing 7 years in prison. When Rodrigo Rato, this many years in prison, and there wasn't a decision. The judge's decision wasn't ready. So you need to publish. If you don't publish the years they're going to be in prison, or all the information, how many years a man is going to be in prison for killing a woman, it seems that gender violence is not condemned. No, I want to mention something. We're talking about the media, and we have to also close the session, but we're talking about the media as a whole, and TV is not the same as radio or as newspapers. Not even all newspapers are the same. They all choose. So you need to choose which media you're using. And in the media where I work, we do inform about these things. And I know that, this would be a very long discussion. So I'm going to let you say bye and close the session. Please, I just want to say thank you for all the people who listen to us today. Thank you to all the men with whom we can have healthy relationships, and thank you to these three big professionals. Thank you for writing our thoughts in words that are going to be eternal. And I really I'm a little bit touched to be here with these two amazing writers, because my husband, the first thing he did, he made me sign a document where I accepted not to read books. So if he knew I'm here with a writer who received the Princesa de Asturias award.
Thank you. This was very moving and alive and interesting, and I think that's what we have to keep doing. We, all of us here.
Yeah.
That's it. Thanks.
Nada, pues dar las gracias.
Yes, I just want to thank Telefónica, all of you who joined us, Isabel for moderating us, and in my case, I was feeling like a 15-year-old. I was so excited to get to meet Siri, who I've read and I admire, and then I saw Ana Bella was also here. I had seen her videos. I really recommend. I encourage you all to see them, because it's a very important testimony, not only because of her work with physical violence, but that psychological violence that she describes. I had never met her personally, and it's really been a pleasure, and it's been an honor. So thank you.